Hey climbers, and welcome to chapter 4 of this Intro to Bouldering course. In this chapter, we're going to cover two main topics: using momentum to influence movement efficiency on the wall, and an introduction into coordination moves. Coordination moves are seen more often than ever before in modern climbing gyms, so we want to be sure to set you up for success early on in your climbing career so you can tackle these moves head on moving forward. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and spend the majority of our time of this chapter on the wall talking about these moves. Let's get into it. Okay, before we jump on the wall today, I just want to reiterate a few points from the previous chapters to make sure that we're set up for success in this first part, using momentum. So in order to use momentum effectively on the wall, we need two things to happen. One is we need to load our lower body, meaning we need to put our weight on our feet. And that happens through really accurate foot placements. So as we talked about in the previous chapter, making sure that we're placing the tip of our shoe exactly where we want it on the hold. Next up is going to be making sure that you're hanging off of your arms. These two things in combination, when we hang off of our arms and load our feet, that's going to allow us to not only pull up, but also drive with our legs in combination to influence our belly button, basically our center of gravity, up the wall. So when it comes to using momentum on the wall, those are the two things that we're thinking about, is hanging on our arms and driving up off of our feet. So we can pull on our arms and stand up in combination to drive us up the wall. So let's go ahead and demo this a few times so you can see what it looks like. Okay, for the first move here to talk about using momentum, we have a V1 here. This is going to be a great one to demo this movement on because the move is straight up above. So we're really going to need to drive hard with our legs in order to get up there. So reminder for the two tips for completing these movements with momentum. It's going to be hanging off of your arms and placing your feet accurately. So when we do both those things in combination, we're going to set ourselves up well to load our lower body, the stronger muscles, to drive ourselves up the wall when we begin to pull. So it's the pulling and the pushing in combination that will move us up the wall. Let's go ahead and demo this movement both ways, first improperly, and then we'll do it the proper way after. So let's go ahead and do it. So as you can see in the demo, both ways worked, but the second method, using our legs to drive, was much more efficient and required a lot less energy. So let's go ahead and put this into practice with a couple more climbs. Okay, we've got another V1 right behind us here, and we're going to try the same sort of thing. So let's try with the improper method first, and then we'll try with the proper method so you can see how using momentum in our lower body can influence the efficiency of these moves. So as we see again in this example, we can do all the moves by pulling our body up first and then reaching, but it requires a lot more strength and effort rather than just using our lower body to drive while we're hanging on our arms. So let's go ahead and jump into a final example here for using momentum. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the final boulder for this using momentum portion of this chapter. It's going to be a blue V4. This first move is going to be really, really hard, if not impossible, to lock off and reach for, so we're likely going to need to use momentum. But let's go ahead and see if we can do it both ways. Okay, it looks like both ways went for this lower portion, but without a doubt, the second method, using our legs to drive our belly button forward to move our center of gravity that direction, was much easier, much more efficient. So let's go ahead and jump into the coordination portion of this chapter now. Okay, it's time to jump into the coordination portion of this chapter. This is a topic that we're going to dive much deeper into in the future, hopefully with some special guests, so be sure to stay tuned for that. But for now, there's a couple concepts that we want to cover when it comes to coordination. First and foremost is the stimulus that we're trying to produce with this training. So The type of stimulus that we want to produce is a neurological stimulus, meaning we're trying to get the brain to coordinate more muscles to work together to execute a movement pattern. The best way to build this in the body is through deliberate practice and repetition. Basically, once we find a move that's challenging for us in terms of the coordination aspect of the move, we want to make sure that we practice it over and over and over and over again until we can do it without hesitation. This is going to help us build that neural pathway for that movement pattern. And in climbing, that's kind of the name of the game, especially in modern competition climbing. You need to have the most diverse skill set that you can come up with in order to succeed. So how do we build this other than just trying those moves? So I think a great thing to do is progress these movements. So we'll start with a smaller coordination move, something that's not as complicated, and then we'll build it up to make it a little bit more complicated through a couple different strategies. So let's go ahead and jump on the wall and try a couple of these things out in the meantime. Okay, for this intro to coordination chapter, we're going to keep it pretty simple here, and then we'll build up in the next few chapters afterwards. So a couple things that we're going to talk about for progressing these movements. We're going to start with just a basic dynamic movement where you have to let go of the hold and reach with another hand. So the first way that we're going to do this is by keeping our hand down on the start hold here and reaching up above with just one hand, cutting our feet. To progress that next, we're going to go ahead and go with both hands instead of just one hand. So let's go ahead and see what this progression looks like. Okay, that one seemed pretty easy to me, but if you have a challenge with this one, you can either scale it down by moving the holds closer, or you can give yourself better feet or going to a better hold potentially. So go ahead and try to work this into your routine, trying some coordination moves, and really lean into the things that are challenging or scary for you. Let's go ahead and talk about how we can do another dynamic coordination progression. Okay, the next coordination move to talk about is called a double clutch. Basically, when we're jumping from one hold to another hold using both hands. So we did try this in the last one, but for this one, we're going to take our feet off, which is going to be another progression from the last move instead of having our feet on to jump. So let's go ahead and try this one out. Before we do, a few tips. If you can, try to get into this movement with just one kick or one swing. Otherwise, we're just wasting energy. So if you stick this after, 4 or 5 swings and you get the move, see if you can reduce the amount of swings that it takes for you to feel comfortable launching into the next position. This is ultimately going to build a lot of movement proficiency in this style of movement. So let's go ahead and try this one out. Okay, so far we've covered going with one hand with good feet, going with two hands from good feet, and then going with two hands with no feet. So the last one that we're going to cover in this intro to coordination section is jumping to 2 different holds. So this is going to ask our brain to fire on a different level than we did previously. So let's go ahead and try this out. Okay, that wraps it up for chapter 4. Hopefully you found some useful tips here for using momentum and finding ways to progress your coordination moves on the wall. We'll talk about coordination much more in detail moving forward, but for now it's time to jump into chapter 5, where we're going to cover some off-the-wall strength training for new climbers. I'll see you there.